mentioned the corporate tax. There are some states that, and the income tax, which are two separate things in Minnesota. There's some states that have zero, no corporate tax, like you just mentioned. I know Kurt Zeller's had a bill in the House to try to, I think, lower it 1% every year until it was gone, a kind of a gradual thing. And the income tax is also just, I'll tell you, you look at these states that think taxing and spending is the way to go. They're all the states with the biggest budget deficits. I mean, if taxing and spending worked, folks, why doesn't California have a surplus? Somebody just answer that, just straight out. All right, have to point that out all the time. Well, we'll keep jumping around here. We'll jump to my pet issue, which is education, which is my little issue I go off on all the time. You mentioned you got 4 kids. What's your feelings about the education system in Minnesota? What do you think about it, just generally speaking?
Well, in general, I think that we have an excellent system and an excellent start. We have, especially in my district, there are about 5 districts, 4 of them dominate Senate District 43. We value education, and we have made it very clear that we're willing to make that investment in the future. And I'm glad that we are, because I believe that education can be one of the greatest equalizers for a society. Having said that, it's very confusing to me, going out and door knocking and speaking to the thousands of people that I have so far as a candidate, to listen to people say we don't have enough money in the schools. Well, when you look at the facts, we have had level enrollment, slightly declining, but right around a flat enrollment, but we have been increasing spending, at least for the last decade. So why is there a disconnect? Why do parents think that there is not enough money in education? So I kind of set off almost to research this a little bit. I've sat down with a number of school board members and administrators, and they have all said the same thing. It is restrictions of funding, and then it is also the mandates that are placed upon them. And so they are just absolutely begging to have, simplification of the state's funding to them, and then a release of a lot of the mandates.
Yeah, you mentioned the complicated funding. I've heard there's 3 people in the state of Minnesota who understand it, and they all can't be on a plane together.
Yeah.
That's what I've heard. I have studied that for the last 4 years, ever since I jumped into that issue, and I can't understand it for the life of me either, how much it is. How about when it comes to education, we spend, at least my home district, 281, 80% of their operating budget is spent on people. People is the largest cost. The St. Paul School District, I know, owes over $200 million in future pension liability, which is bigger than their entire operating budget. Is there any, and this might go to state employees, just generally speaking, how about switching out of pensions into more like a 401k type thing? I know Hennepin County's taken some steps in that direction. Things like tenure reform, which is often set by the legislature as it is here in Minnesota. Are those things we've got to look at as money savers to get more in the classroom and less in future liability?
All right, well, you hit on a lot of things there, so I'll see if I can try to go back and
right.
catch on them. The first one you mentioned was that about 80% of your expenditures here in Robbinsdale School District are on personnel, and I think that is probably the best thing, because there's nothing more that can make the greatest difference in the life of a child than that classroom teacher. So to me, that seems like that's a good allocation. But how is that money being spent? I read an article last night, kind of refreshed my memory a little bit about the QComp program. I think QComp is wonderful because it brings a respect to the profession of teaching. It pays people for their outcomes. It pays people for the results, which is what it is like in the rest of industry. I mean, you don't perform your job, you're out of there. Yeah. But and that touches a little bit to tenure. There is absolutely no job outside, of teaching that guarantees you employment. So you have some of that market-based influence there, that we reward competition. It is how our economic system has worked. I don't think that it is respectful to a teacher to say, we're going to pay you based on the number of hours you've been there. I mean, that's babysitting. Let's respect teachers for the job that they're doing every day. You know, I spent 2.5 years as the PTO president at the Fair School in Crystal. You know, I have a great appreciation for many of the challenges beyond educating that our teachers seem to have to handle on a daily basis. And so, yeah, let's respect them as professionals that they are. You had asked the question then about pension reform and a few other issues. You have to be looking at the pensions. I know there were some attempts to do that in the last legislature. It's very hard to have the entrenched interests that are the unions to step back from some of that. But again, there's no market forces. I mean, there was one school district that I spoke to who said they were very proud of the negotiation they had made with their teachers union. Their 2-year salary and total compensation package was they had held to a 7% increase. But with the unallotments and the shifts to the schools, the payments, they have zero coming in. So with zero coming in, they were able to give away 7%. I mean, this kind of defies common sense for most people.
Maybe I shouldn't complain about 281 then.
Yeah. But the most important thing I think we can do, and it comes back to the simplification of funding and the mandate reform, is returning the control to the locally elected school boards. I have a lot of questions asked of me of a candidate if I would support this policy or that, whether it's sex education in the schools or some kind of specific curriculum. I don't think that is something that the state legislature can decide. You know, the different communities around the state have different values and different needs, and to have a one-size-fits-all policy coming out of St. Paul, I think kind of pits an awful lot of special interest against each other, that you lose complete and total focus on educating children and preparing them for their jobs and their futures that they're going to have.
Well, you mentioned how important competition is, and I think competition in education is just a necessity. I mean, would you like to see more things like charter schools or as more choices outside of just the public school system for people?
This question came up, or something very similar, in a forum 2 weeks ago. We already have an awful lot of choice as parents right now through open enrollment, and I have appreciated that. I've had 3 of my 4 children at one point, open enrolled. Even well, it's a little bit different. We map the district that they go to FAIR. But I've benefited from open enrollment and being able to find the appropriate, educational environment for my child, because, we celebrate our diversity and everybody's unique, and so no 2 children are going to learn the same way, and your district may not have the answers for your child. So I appreciate the open enrollment. The question that came up was about charter schools. Charter schools are public schools. They receive state funding. But what makes them different than from your neighborhood school? They are not bound by as many of the same mandates. And so this is kind of, you see a lot of the superintendents seeing these charter schools come into their district, and they have the same amount of money, but maybe they don't have the same mandates. Why don't we level the playing field? If these mandates, you can't innovate with a mandate, is what one administrator told me, and I think that he has a fantastic point. If they are locally accountable, then let them try different things. And so I think that if you are equaling the playing field by reducing the mandates in the same way that charter schools are, that's not say throw the baby out with the bathwater and get rid of all mandates. There are oftentimes the rules and regulations are in place for a good reason.
Yeah, we don't want to give 281 a blank check. Sorry, guys, we don't.
No, but I mean, even some of the ones about when can you start your school year? Yeah. I mean, that's something that can be left up. There's going to be areas of the state, because of the hospitality industry, that perhaps want to keep the summers open for the cabin season and for the tourists that come in. But you may have some of the more urban or suburban where that's not, the employment of young people is not such a big role or a big factor, who would like to go to a more of a year-round model and have that retention. And you often have that summer, that summer setback.
Yeah.
And so I just think that these things you really need to leave up to the local schools, and if you are reducing the mandates, then you end up with the more competition with the neighborhood schools and the charter schools.